Welcome, everyone, to What the Force, and welcome to a new episode of Once Upon a Time in the Outer Rim, where we will be covering the Mandalorian show, which is available on Disney Plus from a connotative, mythic, and genre theme perspective. And with me, and hopefully for every episode, Alex Kane. Welcome back, Alex.
Hey, what's up? Thanks so much.
This episode, which is Chapter 2, The Child. This is the first time we got a title for the episode.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but they actually put it on as a title card. Yep.
Yeah. So it actually got a title, which is really cool. And one thing that both of Alex and I were laughing about after last episode is that when you listen to it, just occasionally you can hear a hint of both of our children separately.
Yeah, far off in the background, participating
throughout the thing. Yeah, and you know what? That's just ambient noise for the Mandalorian, which is now super child focused.
All children are Baby Yoda.
Yes, exactly. I haven't figured out what we're supposed to call this child yet, other than child. Some suggestions were string bean, Baby Yoda, which is what is the name in my household. Child. Some people are even still calling it the asset, which is really interesting. Either way.
Yeah. I don't know. The total pain is how parents might describe their children sometimes. So it'd be good to know how the Mandalorian feels about the child. But no, as it turns out, children are good and sometimes helpful. So I don't know. This episode was really interesting in terms of how he interacted with the child, and we'll get to more of that. But
yeah, I'm super excited to dig into it. But just as a reminder, make sure to subscribe on your app of choice or on YouTube to make sure to stay up to date with these episodes, as we'll try to release them as soon as we're done recording and watching the episodes, of course. And of course, you get all of the other What the Force content. So please do that to make sure to keep up to date. First, I wanted to start out the episode with actually a Werner Herzog quote. They actually had a red carpet event for the premiere, which was actually just a few days ago. And Werner Herzog was interviewed on the red carpet, and he had this amazing thing to say. So I'm just going to pull that up right now.
I think Jon Favreau introduced me to this universe and to the new mythology, because I have no real deep knowledge about what's going on. But I understand that there's a new mythology, a new universe emerging way beyond science fiction. And we haven't had such a thing very often in human cultural history. We have seen it in ancient Greek mythologies emerging, but not very often. And this is one of the times where something important is happening. And I took it seriously, and I like to be dragged into it and discover. I'm discovering a whole universe.
All right. So that was from Variety, and Variety tweeted that out from the red carpet event for the premiere of The Mandalorian. And I am over the moon to hear that. Werner Herzog actually has talked about how he doesn't even watch movies very often. He grew up on classical mythology and is very passionate about that, and actually jokingly said when he wants to see drama, he just watches WrestleMania. And the fact that he is so into the mythological aspects of this Star Wars mythopoeia, and Jon Favreau understands it enough now through the Jedi school he had to go through with Dave Filoni, that I'm just buzzing from how amazing that is. That not only has this student also become a teacher. What did you think of that quote?
I'm not really a Lord of the Rings scholar, and I don't know much about it, but I was always told by people who really love those books and those films that Tolkien set out to kind of deliberately create a mythology for sort of sort of a more timeless modern day, Western European mythos, sort of in the vein of like, King Arthur and all that, but, something a bit more akin to the Greeks and all that. And I don't know how true that is in terms of his, his biography and his intentions, but, it seems like he made something fairly timeless. George Lucas is an interesting figure because, he comes from sort of that Buck Rogers, comic book background. He's just sort of the nerdy kid who didn't do very well in school. And he sort of, he wanted to make this little movie about these space soldiers and, the sort of...
he wanted to make it feel old and like a fairy tale long time ago, right? But also like have the freedom of it being kind of in space and having technology, but so it's far away. So it doesn't need to be human. It doesn't necessarily need to have humanistic aspects, but he also did want to make it driven and speak to us on a very social level. And that was after reading, Joseph Campbell's work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems to me that his ambitions grew for it after he, saw episode 4 come out and how people sort of just completely latched on to it. He didn't want to make Empire and Return of the Jedi himself, sort of famously. He wanted to just kind of, do the producer role and kind of, not kill himself making those 2 movies after, sort of the troubles that he'd gone through with the original. But, look at Star Wars and what it's become, 42 years later or something like that. At this point, it's hard to argue with what Herzog is saying. Star Wars is this effectively timeless
thing. The mythopoeia.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the in-universe story, the mythology that they are building on is what he is referencing. That was a parallel that Jon Favreau used to get him on board, and that's amazing to me.
Yeah. To sort of to sell him on Star Wars as this big, cultural touchstone that generations kind of pick up the baton and run with it and kind of reinvent it over and over again. And we keep seeing that happening with the Clone Wars or with Rebels or, these Marvel comics or video games like Jedi Fallen Order. Yeah, we're really seeing the sort of one story concept, the sort of iterative storytelling concept play out over and over, and more and more the truth of Star Wars as, myth is it's happening all the time.
I'm so glad that you messaged me the other day to be like, this one story thing, Marie Claire. I think you're right.
playing Fallen Order, and I'm like, okay, there might be something to this, and I always wanted to think that there was something to it, and I thought that it was a good, effective way of looking at what happens with something like the story group and reinventing these stories through resistance or what have you, whenever like a new big project comes out, the Mandalorian now, of course. And it's really so true. Fallen Order definitely is the thing that kind of proved that to me once and for all. That, we're seeing the same kind of story play out again and again from different angles as we move through the funhouse mirror maze of Star Wars and mythology, I guess.
It just gives us different perspectives and lenses to look at the same thematic and mythological, archetypical, events in some ways. And these things speak to us on a subconscious level. So to repetitively do them as well drills home the point in different media. So I'm just so happy that we get another media source to like appreciate the storytelling. And one thing that I've really noticed, and we'll get into this in detail, is that the symbolism is very, very like easy to spot. It's not hidden. It is very direct parallel. It's right there on the surface. And because I think that they really wanted, especially children, And men, I would say like men and women to like pick it up very easily. It's not like it's hidden, right? This is very on the surface symbolism. So we'll get into that. But did you want to run through the recap of the episode, Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Mandalorian and his new co-pilot, the little green cherub, make their way through a valley of shadow. Lizards watch them as they pass, and Baby Yoda, for lack of a better name, acknowledges them. The Mandalorian stops suddenly and places a hand on his sidearm, and a party of Trandoshans attacks. The scuffle takes place. Baby Yoda coos, and the chapter title appears on screen, The Child. We get some great Jawa content, always a big win, with the Mandalorian, whose name is actually Din Djarin, boarding a sandcrawler in the Star Wars equivalent of a Western train robbery. Baby Yoda whizzes along behind him in his tiny hover pod. The Jawas stun Djarin with a burst of electricity, and he falls off the crawler, failing to take back the parts he's come for. His ship's an unflyable wreck, so the pair seeks out Nick Nolte's character, Quill, yet again. In the middle of negotiating with the Jawas to get his parts back, the Mandalorian shoots fire over their heads, very dragon-like, and the Jawas agree to return his starship parts in exchange for what they call the egg.
Suba!
And so the knight in shining armor must face the thing that resides within a large, pitch-black cave nearby, but he can't slay it alone.
Nope, he can't slay it alone. Oh, man, this episode. What did you think of it, Alex?
It's so short and sweet, and yet I think I liked it more than the first episode even. I think the fact that we spend more time with the Yoda child, which is not necessarily Yoda's child, of course, but, what are we going to call this thing? The child. There's a lot of sort of cute moments with it reaching up to him and, trying to sort of, you see the child reacting to the world around them and cooing and making cute noises. And I love Jawas and I love the Sandcrawler. So getting content like that. Jawas go back to the beginning of the whole thing with A New Hope and Luke and this sort of, scavenging and surviving in the desert sort of, very Rey-like existence, just seeing the beast sort of surprise the Mandalorian, take him by surprise and kind of kick his ass a little bit, and then seeing that, the masculine power of the sword and the shield and just raw strength isn't always what it takes to defeat the giant mythic beast. Sometimes you need, sort of the feminine touch in there. Sometimes you need magic. And we see that often. We see that I have a whole list here of things that reminded me of, but, I absolutely loved the big fight and the big, sort of X-Wing out of the swamp moment that we got there. It was incredible. I loved it.
I loved this episode, and I think we talked before this started, and I thought this was a better structured episode than the first one, which is really because I loved the first one so much, and it blew me away. Especially we didn't get any conversation for the first 10 minutes or something like that. It was a good, no words were spoken. It was just a lot of grunting and cooing from the child. There's so much going on in this show from a genre and a mythic and from a symbolic perspective. It was thickly layered and super enjoyable. My head was spinning and I immediately wanted to rewatch it to be like, hey, what the hell did I just watch? This is great. And we're going to dig into some of the things that we saw specifically, but I found that as much as I thought this episode might take a step back from the feminine, it actually quadrupled down again and added even more into it. There was tons of sort of parallels to Western, to, knights, to a little bit of the kind of samurai feel, but really, really still, he is a knight in shining armor who is also a lone kind of Western gunslinger who is now fulfilling the trope of the badass and the child duo. Like, he is fulfilling that like trope of that team that needs to work together. And with that trope specifically, the child tends to be special in some way. Like, this happens a lot. Like, the big one that I brought up last episode, and this is just like kind of reinforced, that is Laura Dannon from Willow. That this badass who has this child with them, the child is like one of prophecy or one of magical powers or magical potential. And this badass is, stoic, doesn't talk much, doesn't have a lot of facial, hard-boiled exterior, literal armor on, metaphorically speaking, or literally in the Mandalorian's case. And this child like sees them as this like hero and sees the good in them and like reacts to them like they want to get to that soft, squishy inside, much like the egg that we see later on, which we will get to. Also, this child tends to be female and also kind of fulfills the Pollyanna trope, which is like, no matter the circumstances or how dire things are, they tend to be happy and like happy-go-lucky in all moments. And it seems to be aligning to that a lot, which is, we're very comfortable with this concept. And there's a lot to be said about how that child being a female child tends to reflect on the kind of foil nature between the badass guy and the child. But also I think that it has to do with, the badass recognizing their inner feminine as something to be nurtured. That was my big into this episode.
There's a good Western parallel for that trope as well, which is the two True Grit films that are based on a novel by Charles somebody, I think. But in True Grit, you have the sort of John Wayne, Jeff Bridges character, who's the grumpy old cowboy, and then you have the the little girl who's hired him, and she's very, her power comes from like optimism and lightheartedness and they sort of rub off on one another, and yeah, he loses some of his true grit and she gets it from him, I guess, or something like that. And of course you got the Hound and Arya Stark in Game of Thrones as well, which is an imperfect version of that trope, but you definitely see the same kind of things happening in the early middle seasons, I think, roughly.
And there is precedence for having like guys be like male babies or male children. We have The Lone Wolf and the Cub, which was kind of a samurai movie all about, there's literal like scenes of him like with a baby carriage. And then also there was a John Ford movie called The Three Godfathers starring John Wayne, and similar situation, orphan child. These three men basically adopt this child, and the mom is dying, and she names him like Robert William Pedro. Robert William Pedro. And it was just a way for her to be like, see, he's named after you. You have to take care of him. And they're all like criminals and kind of like, above the law, or, doing criminal activity. And they kind of turn their lives around, and two of them end up dying, but you can almost view them as three aspects of one person in a way, It's really, really interesting. There was a ton of other kind of Western feel things. Like you mentioned, the train robbery / train heist, trying to get something from the train.
Yeah. Yeah. And also just like the longer stretches of time without dialogue, as you kind of mentioned earlier, and letting the landscape and a silhouette, and then, the landscape and the silhouette and the music tell the story. That kind of thing where
the bandits in the ravine, like that scene was very like it's very medieval as well, from a knight's or from a traveling the road of trials in kind of a way, but it happens quite commonly in Westerns too. Like you're traveling around and you're basically co-opted by bad people. And what was really interesting is they specifically focused on the tracking fob that the Trandoshans dropped. So we know that the Mandalorian knows that there are more people still coming after the child.
Yes. Yeah. And there had been a line in the first episode, I think, from Quill, like many have tried, many have been there before to get this child, and they didn't fare so hot. And sort of you brought up that's a very, Arthurian Excalibur kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to get into that because it's the idea that you must be worthy to claim the mystic artifact. And that's actually a phase kind of in the hero's journey, is that you have like a mystic talisman, and our baby is actually almost fulfilling that like mystic talisman role in our Mandalorian's hero's journey. He takes up this baby and is automatically kind of given both power because the baby is worth something to tons of people, and also now the baby has something special about it, which he discovers through the course of the episode. Another mystical talisman of equivalency in the Skywalker saga is the legacy lightsaber. Luke, when he takes up his father's sword, is literally that version of it. And in the first episode, when Quill, our Ugnaught friend from the planet, played by Nick Nolte, says, many have tried, like you said, and most have failed or died. Well, he realizes that this is the one true hero. And that is very much along the time, like the wording of how they describe the true person who can pull Excalibur from the rock. So there's that true hero mythos. So it ties very much to like a knight's quest. You can't go on it unless you're worthy. The Mandalorian was found worthy by succeeding, and now has been gifted this mystical talisman / child.
Yeah, and the whole chosen one kind of concept, right? Like it comes from like the heroic character within that is kind of not, it's not a static thing, right? But when Thor, he is sort of cast out of Asgard in the 2011 Thor movie, and all these sort of rednecks and Stan Lee and all these big, strong, muscular guys try to pull his hammer out of the desert, and none of them can, but Thor can't either because he is, messed up and he has to sort of right his wrongs. And so there's a sense in which, heroic character comes as part of the hero's journey, right? Where, a person's morality is not a static thing. People are, that's the whole thing, right? Is that it's a hero's journey because they're sort of finding themselves, right? Their characters emerging.
There's gonna be twists. I actually I had a conversation with Josh Johnson, who's been on What the Force before, and mainly because I just like wanted to talk to him about the Mandalorian, and I was just really, really excited about it. And he said, from his perspective, this show is really showing men especially kind of, hey, it's okay to believe in myth, and it's okay to feel this way. And he sees so much of himself in the Mandalorian. One of the things he mentioned was how the Mandalorian is always wearing a helmet, and he's been wearing a helmet since he was a little kid, and how that reminds him of growing up in Texas and being like playing football his whole life, or in Canada, being on a hockey team and always wearing a helmet because you're always playing hockey. You're always playing these sports, so you're kind of always in this gear, and it's part of like your personal identity, and also like your community's identity is to be in this spot. And then he also pointed out that, him growing as a person, we're going to see like the other Texas thing was, having my weapon. I'm a Mandalorian. Weapons are part of my religion. Like he's like, the Mandalorian is from Texas.
Yeah.
But like he also said, like, you know, this is a big step for this Mandalorian who's kind of growing up, figuring out how to be in some ways a man, because like he's learning how all of these pieces of responsibility, and that's all from his perspective. You know, he sees like he's gonna backslide. He's gonna have all these people that care about him, like Quill, and you know, we're gonna have Cara Dune come in, and she's gonna care about him, and IG-11 is gonna come back, and he's gonna care about him, and he's gonna like, I could take care of this myself, and he goes off and tries to do it himself, and his friends are gonna have to rescue him, because it's about figuring out your place in the community. You know, so I like that was us just having a conversation about how, you know, this is really going to reflect the psychological, you know, growing up that we all have to do, is figuring out how do we exist in society and in a community. Really cool stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm 30 years old, and I've been a father for less than 3 years. And, you know, I have like this sort of stay-at-home parent role in addition to my other sort of my writing career and so forth. And I mean, I could fill 10 books with stories about, you know, just the way that society, you know, people really don't trust a man to sort of do the traditionally sort of motherly role. People are very skeptical of the whole, like, oh, the stay-at-home dad. I mean, he, you know, what's he doing? He's playing video games all day. He's not paying any attention to that kid. No, but what you have too is that you know, when a man is about to become a father, I think, and certainly in my experience, you know, you have all these fears about, am I going to be able to do this stuff that I sort of never really, I wasn't raised on, you know, these Disney movies and these stories telling me that I need to know how to be, you know, sort of motherly and things like that, you know. But once it happens and you are a parent and, okay, I have this responsibility, something in you does change. And I mean, I've read, you know, writers talking about this, you know, creative people too, like Ken Liu, you know, one of our sort of mutual faves, so to speak, in the Star Wars. You know, he didn't really write a lot before he had a child, and he was very busy into his work, and you know, he was like a lawyer, and I mean, he wrote and published a little bit, but he says that like the best thing he ever did for his writing career was to become a parent. And yeah, I mean, I think that your character is sort of revealed when suddenly you're responsible for like a helpless little, you know, a baby in a bassinet that can't hold a cup to its lips or anything, you know, can't change its own diaper, can't communicate, doesn't know any words. You know, it really does sort of bring out this part that certainly a man who is raised being told, you know, well, you know, why can't you be more of a man? Why can't you, you know, why can't you go out and get a job, you know, building railroads or whatever it is, not building railroads these days, but you know, like that sort of
yeah, you're not out hunting, providing for your family. You're taking the traditional feminine role of caregiver, and that is absolutely mind-blowing for some people who have not had that opportunity to work with or see dads in action. And I'm very, very lucky. My husband actually stayed home. We have a year of parental leave after your child is born. And for our second, he was actually able to stay home for almost half of that time because we shared it. And I went back to work and he stayed home and was like stay-at-home dad for that parental time. And now we both work and everything like that. Our kids are in school. But I have complete respect for stay-at-home dads. They are dads. They're parents. They're doing the job. They're doing the work. And what it does is it teaches you, or at least what I saw with my husband, is that it shows you this like kind of, I don't know, utter world of how much it is to give yourself selflessly over for somebody who can't take care of themselves. Like literally a baby is an invalid. Like you have to feed, care, water, put to sleep, like everything. Yeah, they're tiny, but they can't do anything for themselves. And that is so self-sacrificial that it gives you just this absolute different lens to the world.
Yeah, it's like you identify, right, with Campbell has that whole thing of the it and the thou, right? You do kind of see yourself in this other creature that if you go to Walmart and you're shopping for groceries and a mother walks by and she's got a baby in her cart, you're not like, oh, look at that little one. What can I possibly do for you? Like anything you need, just let me know. You don't have that out in the world. But when you're caring for, a specific child, it's you and this kid at home and he's hungry and he's crying and he's not comfortable and he needs your help. You begin to see the kind of oneness of the human experience, right? You're like, okay, I know what it is to be hungry. I know what it is to be uncomfortable, and I can solve those problems pretty easily for myself. But so yeah, it changes your worldview 100%.
Well, like this is a piece of you that's out there too. Like Arianna Huffington has this great quote, which I absolutely give to new parents all the time because it helps explain the human experience of becoming a parent and taking that on. And she said, deciding to have children is like deciding to have your heart walk outside of your body. So wherever you go, that piece of you is going with you and you're connected always, right? So if they experience pain, you're experiencing pain. It's the first step to understanding the energy and the connection and the compassion between another human being. And yeah, you can have it before that, but this is an instant thing. You care about this other part of you that is out there in the world. Yeah, it's really amazing stuff. I have some more parallels to do with how I feel like the mothering aspects of the Mandalorian are really coming out, but we can get into that in a little bit, especially when we talk about eggs, because we're going to talk about eggs.
Yeah.
I did want to bring up one last kind of medieval sort of genre, fantasy genre is the storming of the castle, because the Mandalorian specifically, in his frustration to Quill, calls it a crawling fortress. And I loved that description of the sandcrawler. It felt very medieval. It felt like I almost like when he was trying to climb up it felt almost like Monty Python comedic with them like throwing stuff off the fortress. And later on when he approaches the cave, it felt very much like Monty Python Search for the Holy Grail when they go and fight the rabbit. Like a little, like, just like, just because I was in that mood and he was in armor and just climbing that fortress, like climbing the sandcrawler was like the failure at trying to storm the castle. And whenever a hero fails to storm the castle, they have to find a new way to get in, right? Because the key is to get in. And I loved that this led us to one of the best conversations between Quill and the Mandalorian. He literally is like on the edge of giving up. He's like, they took apart my ship. I can't believe it. I'm trapped. I might as well just like give up. Hey, get that thing out of your mouth. Like he's like, oh, that's gross to the child who's like chasing the frog like creatures. I have something to say on that too in a moment. But then, Quill is like, well, if you can't fight them for it, why don't you trade them for it? So it's like aggression and anger and fighting doesn't necessarily work. But can we actually figure out how to communicate? How can we negotiate and navigate being part of the same society, even with people we don't necessarily agree with? super interesting stuff that's being said there.
There's an old commercial from the 1980s, I think, with Stephen Hawking, and he's sort of talking about, it's like a commercial for like Bell telephones or something. Have you ever seen this? And
No.
Stephen Hawking is talking, through his vocalizer computer thing, and he says something like, for millions of years, mankind lived just like the animals do. And then something happened, we learned to talk, implying that civilization and modernity and kind of, not stabbing each other with spears has to do with the ability to communicate, which is, it's a beautiful little commercial, but total tangent. Watch that. Look up the scene with the rabbit in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and then watch the old Stephen Hawking Bell commercial as well.
Look at all this homework of random pop culture references.
Yes.
So that scene where we got so many dad moments. Like the top ones for me were like him like checking on the health of the baby, knowing where the baby was, making sure the baby wasn't in harm. A lot of people were comparing this to like, Kindergarten Cop or one of those sort of movies, like everything's going wrong and the kid is in charge, kind of situations. But I really wanted to talk about, we can get into kind of more of those in a little bit, but the mythic stuff, especially with like how Werner Herzog and his quote, I wanted to just talk about how whenever Quill speaks, it's important.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then when he ends it with "I have spoken," it's almost in like a holy way, like to say, this was important, you had better have listened.
Yeah. And
you have that great quote from the end of the episode. I just want to kind of frame it up a little bit with that.
Oh, sure, yeah. So the end of the episode, the last time that Quill talks in the episode, he says, "Thank you for bringing peace to my valley, and good luck with the child. May it survive and bring you a handsome reward. I have spoken."
So I want to dissect that line just for a moment. Peace in the valley. So a peaceful valley is a holy place. It is like the promised land. It is from a mythic perspective. In some of the legends, Arthur, instead of kind of going to Avalon or whatever, ends up going and sleeping in a peaceful valley. It's also got like the connotations from like, promised land type religious scenarios. And it's, to me, the parallels to Tatooine specifically in this episode are just really striking. We have Jawas, we have sandcrawlers, we have the desert, we have the kind of walking the ravine like R2-D2 does. There were so many of these parallels to Tatooine, which is almost in some ways like this holy, like significant location by which the chosen one was like came out of. Like Tatooine is important. It had Luke, it had Anakin. There's something happening in this location from a visual perspective to make us think about Tatooine, right? Mm-hmm. And then when he says, "May the child live," I genuinely think that he is kind of saying like, may what you have taken out of this, the child within you, the peace that you have learned from this, live. And then what was the last part of that line again?
Oh, may it survive and bring you a handsome reward, which on the surface is money, but you're saying that he's not talking about money. He's talking about...
He's talking about like the Joseph Campbellinian sense of it, the change within and the elixir for the community. He's bringing back the knowledge from this journey to change his community and change how things are and make things better. And like within that, like kind of Joseph Campbellinian mode, what do you think? And maybe this is a question for our audience and maybe they can answer in, replying to tweets or on YouTube. What do you think is the elixir that at the end of this hero's journey, the Mandalorian is going to know from a knowledge perspective or bring back to his community to make it better? Because he is a community man. He is part of a community, not just the larger galaxy, but this community of Mandalorians that he has a will to make better.
Fascinating. I mean, it's interesting that we have all these stories like Rebels and The Last Jedi and now Jedi Fallen Order that have all come out, fairly recently, where the Jedi are no longer at the height of their power and influence like they were in the prequels now, right? So the Jedi become this fabled legendary thing like Luke Skywalker, and the Jedi Order must return, and so it's almost like the child is sort of the symbol for what once was, and we've really never seen in a way that wasn't sort of corrupted by war and Darth Sidious and things like that, right?
Yeah, you just absolutely think about this. This is a child who lived through Sidious's height in power, both massive wars that ended up happening in the galaxy, so the Clone War and the Revolution, which is what Werner Herzog's character calls it. And it seems unaffected, unaware even of what has happened and transpired, but symbolically makes us tie ourselves, and interestingly, to our mind goes to the prequels, right? 50 years, we're like, this is way in the past. Our mind also goes to the original trilogy. And the fact that it's a child, this child will be potentially 900 years old one day. This goes to the future too. This child is literally an era bridger, like we brought up in the last episode, like Ezra Bridger, between the start of the prequels, way before the start of the prequels, all the way past the sequel trilogy, potentially.
Well, the Mandalorians in the Clone Wars are fascinating too, because you have Duchess Satine as sort of the leader who comes in to Mandalore and says, maybe there is a way to be a different kind of people. And yes, like, in the old ways where we were about war and the Jedi were something to be fought back. And, our worth was measured by our ability to win wars and be victorious in battle and all this stuff. And for, Duchess Satine, like many figures in our real world history, comes forth and says, what if we all got along and were peaceful and good to one another? And then, of course, we know what happens to people who suggest peace as a policy. They usually get shot, and so...
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't know. I see that as kind of, is this baby Yoda, sort of that Duchess Satine sort of, what if we brought more of a, the whole thing with the sort of counterculture movement of the 1960s, like what if we gave peace a chance and all that? So maybe baby Yoda is a hippie.
Yeah. So that's what you're thinking is like, this is a representation of the change.
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, the franchise is called Star Wars, but we've seen what war does to good people. So
yeah.
Obi-Wan Kenobi, I like that guy a lot, and he's been through some stuff, and he's suffered some losses, and characters like him and Luke and Padme, they're these really good heroic figures who saw some stuff, and war was not kind to them, and the Mandalorians historically are all about war. They love it, and so there could be some irony there that the title of the show is The Mandalorian, and indeed he is one, but,
But it's about how to maybe grow past just that. But also it's about like Jedi, how Jedi choose to fight, how Mandalorians choose to fight, what they choose to fight for is also really important. And I think that might be part of what is being learned throughout the course of this show. One thing that Josh let me know, and I'll bring up on this show, is that Arvala 7, which is the name of the planet that they're on, if you take off the A and you just look up Arval, it actually refers to a group of people that basically were called the Arval Brethren, and it was during the Roman times as they gave tribute to the changing of the seasons. So they were basically like a bunch of priests in a way that protected and gave tribute to rebirth.
Fascinating.
I mean, it's just a really interesting thing. Sometimes Star Wars does that literally with names. They'll like change a name, like the spelling of one letter, or they'll drop a letter from a name. And it has that symbolic meaning to it in what they've been looking for. So, they were kind of priests of spring and new growth and things like that, which was really interesting.
Yeah. This is the series with a guy named Grief and the franchise that has a character called Savage Opress. So names are never insignificant when they sound, they sound
like something. Yeah. I also absolutely loved like how Quill was like, you're my guest and thus I must help you.
Yes. I loved that.
I loved that so much. There was a lot of I don't know. It felt almost like a sacred tradition in some ways. Like almost everything that Quill did almost felt steeped in meaning.
Yeah, because he's a student of myth, right? Like you. So he says, I've read the stories. So, this is a guy who he knows that like the heroic actions we take in life, ultimately can affect the world. And the Mandalorian might just say, I killed the beast and I did my job or whatever to the best of my abilities, just another day on the job. But to Quill, he brought peace to my valley. That's another thing entirely. There's symbolism at work and we're dealing in the field of ideas, right? And kind of,
Yeah, the cognitive realm.
Yeah.
So I did want to talk about the mini hero's journey that he went on during the course of the episode, including another journey to the subconscious. That's 2 for 2 episodes, Alex.
Yes.
And one thing about the armor, and I know we talked a ton about it last episode, but it's something I noticed as I half rewatched the first episode kind of before getting ready for this episode. When he approaches the like corridor that takes him down the spiral staircase, there is literally just a piece of cloth hanging in the doorway. And so that ties to the concept of going beyond the veil. Right? So we know he's entering the realm of the other by going beyond this veil. And it's almost like no one could see or no one could understand what was going on and the importance that was inside of that location, the forge. So absolutely loved it. Let's talk about this next time he goes into the subconscious, i.e. the cave.
Yeah.
So he gets this mission from the Jawas to go and find the egg. The Suba. I think that's what they were saying. And he's like, the egg? Like what? And he brings the baby along with him. Wasn't that interesting? Like that baby is going with him no matter where he's going.
Yeah. Yeah, he's not going to leave his kid with a stranger or whatever. It's
like he's taking that baby into the mud pit. And then he finds the cave. They focus on the cave. So as a reminder, caves are inherently feminine from a symbolic perspective. And this is a very feminine space that he is about to enter. And he's specifically looking for a mother and an egg. So he enters, it's wet, it's damp. He finds the mother in there. And then he fights the mother, which again ties to this concept of, fighting your dragon, fighting your...
Bly says the giant, right?
Yeah. Fighting your inner demon. This mother is like hairy and like aggressive. And I love the moments when the Mandalorian notices that this creature, was it a mudhorn? Mudhorn. And the mudhorn notices the baby Yoda and like turns towards it and instantly like he does this thing where like he moves the baby carriage or the kind of egg-shaped thing that baby Yoda's in off to the side. And he did that a few times in like the show. And I just like, I loved how spatially aware he was of where the baby Yoda was at all times. But he starts to fight, and he's almost like beaten, battered, bruised, and is still willing to attempt to take this thing down with a single knife, and protect the baby behind him in that moment. It was epic. And then we see the magical moment where the, powerful, magical child actually holds the creature back.
Yeah. Lifts it up in the air like Yoda with the X-Wing, like literally levitates it and grasps it,
Yep. And then the Mandalorian is able to complete the task of getting the egg and bringing it out of the darkness. And we can go into what that egg means in a few minutes, but what happened in that is like a death and rebirth. Like he is being born again. He has experienced things. He actually gets knocked out twice almost in the episode. Once when he falls off the sandcrawler, and then once when he gets hit by the mudhorn. And that's like he's changing as a person because of this. Really interesting stuff.
Yeah. I found it fascinating that the baby Yoda, it is a reminder that magic and power, like sometimes it comes from within you. So it takes a lot out of him to hold this thing in the air. And, I sort of saw a parallel, to, when Sidious says unlimited power in episode 3, and, he's sort of, throwing all that electricity into Mace Windu, he's saying that, I have unlimited power and that's what I'm offering you. And, nothing's going to stop me. I can just keep going here. But then once Anakin helps him and they sort of do the 1-2, assist move there, then Sidious falls back and he's just like utterly exhausted, and he like lets out a little grunt, and baby Yoda does the exact same thing once Mandalorian puts the knife in the beast's throat. I mean, it's the exact same thing as, Sidious and Anakin defeating Mace Windu. It's that, yes, I gave all of myself that I could give in this moment of like, holding this person back with magic, poor Mace Windu, damn it. Rest in peace. But, that same thing where like, Baby Yoda falls back and is exhausted and just looks so just spent, and I think it like falls asleep for like a long time after that, right? Or something?
like a day and a bit. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My son was actually very worried when we watched that this evening. He was like, "Oh, good, he's moving, he's breathing." Yes, and Baby Yoda is a boy to him, so. I mean, I was like, I'm pretty sure it's going to be a girl, but I'm happy to be proved wrong for my son's sake. This is also like the truest part that we have, the truest indication that we have entered the world of the fantastical for our Mandalorian. So, and it's brought up kind of really subtly on the way back when they finally get back all the ship parts from the Jawas by giving them the egg. And Quill is like, is it still asleep? And the Mandalorian is like, yes. And Quill is like, I still don't understand what happened. Could you explain it to me again? And the Mandalorian says like, I still don't understand what happened. Mm-hmm. This is like, in some ways, it's like the first steps into a larger world for a Mandalorian. There are more things in heaven and hell than are dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio. He is stepping into the world of the other by being on this journey with this baby, because it is the mystical that he has never had in his life. And that is important from a Campbellian perspective, because it initiates the chains. It's another indicator that he is about to experience a change in his consciousness. He's through this journey, he is going to be transformed. Cool stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, it's just it's funny that you I thought of like the Legend of Zelda games, right? Like with the giant like beast Ganon that you fight at the end, you spent the whole game with like a sword and a shield, like Sleeping Beauties, what Prince Philip or whatever. And you're taking on this thing. But there's always the added element of this creature is a wizard, or this creature is, mythic and magical. So therefore, sometimes you need like an assist from the sort of the feminine, and the feminine is often like the sort of magical figure who then, I can use my power to subdue this thing, kind of like I was talking about with, Sheev. I guess Sheev is a source of feminine power now in my brain, but no,
he is. His Sith magic is all from Mother Talzin from the Night Sisters. He has co-opted feminine power.
I love that. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. But just, you've got sort of like the sword, or in the Mandalorian's case, you've got like guns and daggers because you're the Mandalorian. But you need like more than that to sort of slay a dragon, right?
Well, like the Lady in the Lake gives Excalibur back to Arthur after keeping it for a while. There's Zelda that's helping out Link in The Legend of Zelda. Yeah. I'm jiving with this.
Yeah, I don't know. It's fun. I like you have to, there's more to like defeating something for good than just like stabbing it, right? Like you have to sort of identify with it and kind of recognize this like sort of sacred act that you're doing, right? Like when the Native Americans killed the buffalo, like there's a covenant that is understood there, and you're not just sort of killing mindlessly because the Mandalorian needs to make a few bucks. Like you're doing sort of an act that has like layers of symbolism, like what is it? Campbell says something like this is the way of things, like this is nature, what I'm doing here, and therefore Quill says, you've brought peace to my valley. It's not like a hunter out in the woods merely just shooting at deer and killing them for a trophy or whatever. It's he's sort of like cleansing this darkness that's in the cave, right?
Yeah, I agree. Before we get into kind of like a lot of the feminine symbolism and the, we've already talked a bit about it, but I really want to talk about eggs specifically because they're really important and there's a lot of parallels in here and they mean a lot. And I want to understand what you think they mean too, because I think it will be really fascinating. I did notice this kind of weird thing and I want to see if there's more parallels to it later on. So in general, the Mandalorian, especially in the first episode, when he replaces his pauldron, you actually see underneath and it's like got circuits. And that circuitry very much reminded me of, remember when Vader takes off his helmet and you see the circuitry of like the over thing that's like controlling everything?
Yeah.
And it reminded me of Vader's like chest plate. Like the mechanics are underneath the armor. Like he is machine as well as man. And so he has this very like symbolic thing. So he's like encased in his armor and he never takes off his helmet. And I get a lot of Vader off of that, especially the fact that they're basically on a Tatooine analog, right? So Jawa's desert, Quill is a moisture farmer. Like we're supposed to think about that. It's like Vader has gone back, but like as a semi-midpoint lost boy trying to reclaim what he has lost, his source. What is his source? And he goes and finds basically this child, right? This green symbol of power. And again, I think feminine, and again, ready to be proved wrong, but has the ability to heal. We see that the Mandalorian is like cauterizing his wound from the fight with the Trandoshans at night. Like, so he's sitting around that like basically lamp and the baby keeps on crawling out and trying to touch his wound. I think the baby was trying to like heal him in that moment. And by cauterizing his wounds, it's like he is burning like Anakin under his armor. And there's like this idea, like the only thing that could heal Anakin was his child, and he wouldn't allow his child to heal him twice.
Fascinating.
He denied him twice, denied Luke twice. So there's this really interesting thing that's happening, and I'm just going to try to pay attention to it if I see more of it happening. But the Mandalorian kind of being this mechanical man underneath, and then inside the armor even is the man, and then he's also burnt underneath. There's something going on there. There's also like a feeling like, you know, it's Tatooine and these like desert planets are dead worlds. And all of a sudden, as soon as he has the baby, the child, it rains and he goes to a mud pit and there's like frogs everywhere. Mm-hmm. It's like a rebirth has started on the planet.
Amazing. A lot of this went by me on this episode for sure. You mentioned the circuit board pattern, and my brain went somewhere really unexpected, which is that in the not canon, but nevertheless very important Clone Wars series that Genndy Tartakovsky did, the sort of very, very cartoon, very stylized show. Anakin and Obi-Wan are like, they're deep in the Clone Wars. The Clone Wars is raging. Anakin, I think they're on a very sort of muddy world at the time or around that time, that sort of fits that description of rain and mud. And he goes through this weird sort of shamanistic rite of passage that sort of serves as his, maybe not his Jedi trials, but I mean, symbolically in the course of that show he does. And they sort of place these sort of shaman creatures, sort of slug-like things on his chest, and they sort of like tattoo him or ink him, and they sort of ink him with a circuit board pattern tattoo on, I believe, his right arm, which of course makes sense because by that point, he's got the one piece of his Vader on him, which is his right arm, So yeah, I don't know. That's interesting that, and then of course George Lucas goes to great pains to show us Hayden Christensen shirtless, right? Which is interesting because we don't see Vader's flesh very much. We don't see his sort of human face often. We see like, a peek of him in Rogue One, I guess, but then Return of the Jedi, we don't see him until, tell your sister you were right, I'm human.
In that scene, he's actually described as like this almost like from a meta perspective, he looks almost like a cracked egg or like this proto-human. He is back to being this like not fully formed person.
The worm baby, right?
Yeah, the worm baby. Yeah. Yeah, the worm baby. Are you ready to talk about eggs?
I guess so. Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, so we have the egg. Soba! From the Jawas, they desire this egg. And so the Mandalorian goes and catches it and gets it and brings back the prize. And it is this hairy, weird looking egg. Geek Mystic online actually said it looks like a human ovum. Like literally, if you look at pictures of like ovum, like human eggs, they look like kind of like hairy. They're round and they're hairy if you look at pictures of them. And in so many ways, this was very representational of a rebirth of our Mandalorian, right? Like he came out of the cave with his egg, with his prize. And, but there's more going on in this. When he comes back to the Jawas, he presents the egg. He's like, yeah, here's your egg. And they immediately crack it open and start to stick their hands into it in this like greedy kind of way and start to eat all of it up. And what is super fascinating is that inside of Baby Yoda's little perambulator, there's a little bit of yellow orange inside it. So like occasionally you can see this little flash of yellow orange. And so to me, there's a parallel here and a deliberate symbolic expression of our hero's fears, that if he were to return Baby Yoda to, our evil ex-Imperials and the Doctor, that they will just crack it open and greedily eat the insides or destroy what is going on with this child. And it is like either foreshadowing or the reflection of his own thoughts symbolically on screen.
Fascinating. Yeah, when he comes out of that cave, it sort of beats him back and throws him out of it, and he's covered in brown mud.
He's covered in goo.
and like I think parts of his chest piece or whatever is like sort of flaking off of him, like hanging off loosely, and the egg itself is very like brown and squishy and kind of looks like the Mandalorian does in some ways when he gets beaten back.
He is that egg too, right? Because these pieces are him. He is that egg, and I think that like it also kind of expresses his fear that should he let that happen, he will lose this newfound understanding of his own, like, i.e. child, and also femininity and caregiving. It's really, really interesting because, like, I was trying to find more about egg symbolism, right? Obviously, it's a rebirth thing. We use it for Easter and springtime and, all of those things. So eggs and Baby Yoda being in an egg that floats around is very significant. But also there's this whole understanding of how birds treat their eggs and their young. And it is the ultimate, ultimate understanding of motherhood. So when, like, say a chicken lays eggs, they sit on those eggs and protect them until they are born. And then even as the chicks are born, they still stay kind of within a radius of the mother hen, or so they can quickly like go under the mother hen and hide. And the mother hen, much like the Mandalorian, has this incredible spatial awareness of where those chicks are, and actually will, like, if you actually watch videos of it, they'll like scoot them under themselves. Same with like the pushing the egg away from danger, protecting, getting in front of the predator. Basically our Mandalorian was almost acting like a mother hen this episode.
I noticed that the pod, the way it sort of pilots the pod and and hovers around is actually, we actually see Yoda do that in Attack of the Clones with his little chair that he pilots around in the Jedi Temple when he's talking to Obi-Wan and Mace Windu briefly. So that's kind of fascinating. That's the movie where we see Yoda spending a bunch of time with kids and kind of interacting with children too. So that's kind of fascinating. Again, someone like Dave Filoni, who is helping shape The Mandalorian as a story, he's not, he's seen Attack of the Clones a time or two. So it's fascinating.
He loves the prequels.
Yeah, he loves the prequels.
And also, it's so funny because, like, during that celebration panel, Jon Favreau was like, and Dave has taught me to love the prequels. So.
Yes.
So did you have any thoughts on the egg?
The egg, I was sort of racking my brain to think about what I picture an egg to be. And I actually, one of the things, I thought about a few different, but like I thought about the movie Akira. Did you ever see that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is a weird, just like everything in that movie is pretty much, symbolic, it's, but basically you have these sort of children who are born with this, world-ending psychic potentiality, right? Like they're these psychic powers. They're sort of mutants with, telekinetic gifts or what have you. And like, you can interpret the end of the film how you want to, I guess. But to me, this idea is that, children, especially an egg, they represent the unknown, the sort of the limitless unknown. And, I have this image in my head of the children in Akira, their sort of final word on the thing is to sort of destroy and recreate the universe, I think is kind of what you see. How it's hard to describe. I've only seen that film one time, but you don't exactly walk away forgetting it. It sort of sticks in your mind.
It's like filled with potentiality, right?
Yeah.
Like that's That's part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like in Willow, as we've talked about before, like the fact that someone is willing to commit infanticide to kill a little crying newborn baby. You have to be pretty terrified of a baby to want to kill it. That's like a very alien sort of savage concept. In Zack Snyder's 300, they've got like, oh, we just discard the rest. Like if a baby is not fit for war, we discard them, and that's like a horrific, awful, terrible image or thought. And so yeah, for the queen in Willow to want to kill this baby, there's some power at play there. The idea that who knows what this baby will become.
And this is not the first time that we've seen babies in egg form being protected by sort of monster mothers. We've seen it now in, Vader Immortal. We saw it in actually Rebels on Geonosis with the one remaining new egg and the former queen trying to protect it. We saw recently just Jedi Fallen Order came out. There's an egg situation happening there too. These kind of monstrous mothers with their eggs is like very significant. And in some ways, the Mandalorian has almost become the mom to this egg in the form of Baby Yoda.
Yeah. Yeah, the dragon in the cave is interesting because Knights of the Old Republic, the sort of legend video game that everybody loves because of the parallels to Reylo and things like that. There's a scene in that game that's like right out of this episode where you have to venture into the cave and a giant crate dragon, comes chasing you out, and you have to sort of slay the dragon in order to be able to enter the cave and, take what you want from it. So that's kind of, yeah. And of course we have like eggs in the Marvel Poe Dameron comic, this idea that and an egg is something sacred. And, there's like a whole religion, I think, in the Poe comic based around this one specific physical egg that's sort of, we built our civilization around this egg and our religion around this egg. So at this point, who knows where the egg even came from, but, we are the egg now.
Yeah. And, the cosmic egg, which is that we're all connected and everything is, interconnected because we all came from the original egg. And eggs are to remind us of that. And because of the infinite circle being, cylindrical and in some ways that they are to remind us of our interconnectedness. There's a lot going on in this show.
So much.
Did you have anything more to say on this episode?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, just the sort of concluding thought that like, children are our way of kind of connecting to the future, as you sort of pointed out with the Baby Yoda in terms of the eras, but also, if the Mandalorian is doing this sort of service to Baby Yoda and kind of escorting him through the Valley of Death and all that, and kind of helping him, survive the demons out in the world who would, crack the egg open and eat it. The Mandalorian is leaving a piece of himself with this creature and right, like in your child sort of carries you with them, right? And you kind of, I mean,
the bond is formed already.
Yeah. You kind of, people leave an impact on you in your life, and things that you do are because, Marie Claire said I should watch Willow, so that's the reason I watched Willow, things like that. So it's fascinating how children, they represent, they're a vessel for you to exist, past your life or whatever,
Yeah, it's the only sense of sort of immortality we transient creatures that exist in the field of time have, which is passing on our sense of self to the next generation.
Well said.
So looking forward to chapter 3, which should be out next week. The summary of it is also available online, which is the battered Mandalorian returns to his client for reward. I feel like they should put a ... at the end of that. But yes, so that is his intention. We will see what actually happens when he shows up there.
Yeah.
Any final words from the episode?
I don't think so. I mean, people were complaining about the length, but there's so much there, and there was so much like sort of unspoken, and that we just sort of saw, and we were able to take so much away from it that I didn't really have complaints about the fact that it was shorter, and my episode summary that I had to write was shorter and things like that. I mean, I think that we're dealing with a level of quality here that some of my favorite chapters in books that I've read have been like a paragraph long or a sentence long, and I think that's a cool special effect that sometimes less is more, and I don't know, I'm fascinated by everything about this show. It's such a good time.
Every penny spent on these episodes has been worth it.
Yes, exactly.
Well, thank you, Alex, for joining me on this chapter 2 conversation. Where can people find you if they're looking for you and your stuff online?
I'm on Twitter at Alex J. Kane, Kane, and I write for various places like StarWars.com and PC Gamer and Games Radar and things like that. So I'm all over the place.
Well, thank you for coming on the show, and thank you for bringing peace to my valley.
I have spoken, right?
I guess. Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is the What the Force theme, orchestral music by Christy Carew for What the Force. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We'd like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love What the Force. And for those patrons obsessed with What the Force, Melody, Night Huntress in Wild Space, Susan, Jessica, Cassandra Corvid, Brad, Black Eyed Lily, and Anna Perez. Make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or other pod apps. It helps people find the show. You can connect with us on Twitter at WT Force Show, at What the Force Podcast on Facebook, or on our website at whattheforce.ca. Feel free to reach out to us and start a conversation. Cheers.